Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're on a very specific kind of mission. We're looking at source material focused on political communication, specifically the rhetoric of Donald Trump. Now, before anyone tunes out, I want to be really clear.
Yeah, this is important.
We are not talking about ideology. We're not getting into policy positions at all. Our only goal here is to look under the hood at the mechanism,
The mechanics of it.
the actual structure of how he communicates. We want to understand why his style breaks so consciously with political norms and maybe get a clue as to why it resonates.
Exactly. I mean, think of this less as a political show and more like, I don't know, an autopsy of a communication strategy.
Yeah, I like that.
We're studying a huge divergence from classical rhetoric. You know, that tradition built on argument and logic and consistency.
Right.
And we're looking at a style that instead just prioritizes action, movement. The question is, what happens when speaking isn't about persuasion anymore, but just about forcing the next move?
Okay, let's unpack this. The anchor for this whole analysis, which I found fascinating, it comes from an observation made during a 45-minute interview with Dasha Burns of Politico.
Yes.
And it starts not with a word, but with something completely physical, his posture.
It's the foundational gesture, and it really speaks volumes. Throughout that entire 45-minute interview, the observation was that he was in this perpetual state of readiness.
A state of readiness, what does that mean?
It means he was always on standby, always in a state of sort of aggressive anticipation. He sat on the absolute edge of a leather chair for the whole interview.
The whole time?
The whole time. He never leaned back. Not once.
Yeah.
His hands never even touched the armrests.
That's so striking when you think about the norm for politicians, right?
It's a complete opposite.
You picture any major world leader, Obama, Merkel, Macron, you name it, in that kind of long-form interview. And what do?
They lean back, of course.
They lean back.
They lean back because they're signaling confidence. They're signaling calm. And really importantly, that they have the leisure to explain things.
Right, that they have the time.
That they have the time, that they trust the process, that policy is nuanced and deserves a careful explanation. It's a performance. They're playing the role of the thoughtful statesman.
But the posture we're talking about here, this constant readiness, it just telegraphs a total impatience with all of that.
It signals the exact opposite. I mean, the core insight you can draw from just that nonverbal cue is this. He is not there to invite you into his world or to calmly explain a policy.
No.
He's there to make something happen.
Yeah.
The posture itself is a sign that he's breaking with convention, that an interview isn't a conversation, it's just, the campaign continuing by other means.
So if that physical readiness is the core idea, how does that need for constant action, for constant movement start to warp the language he uses?
Yeah.
Because this is where the rules of political speech just seem to get thrown out the window.
They do. The sources define his political speech as purely the next move in a game, like a high-stakes chess match, where the only goal is to reach a deal.
So the goal is just movement.
Just that movement is achieved, that's the primary singular goal, that, the precise outcome, the long-term direction, all of that is secondary to just making something happen right now.
So you're moving from this idea of complex long-term policy to just the simple transaction.
Exactly.
Like you're negotiating a real estate deal. The goal isn't to convince the other person of your philosophy. It's just to get them to sign the contract.
That's a perfect analogy. And you see it so clearly when he's asked about something really complex, like, say, the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Okay.
He avoids all the normal language of diplomacy. We are seeking a negotiated, peaceful solution.
That kind of talk, yeah.
That requires patience and time, which rhetoric is designed to reject.
So instead of informing the public, he just goes straight for a tactical disruption. He pressures the people involved directly.
He does. He'll say something like, Zelensky hasn't read the current proposal, his advisors like it, and he needs to find time to read it.
Which is not a policy statement.
It's pure coercion. It has nothing to do with transparency. It's designed to force a reaction, to compel movement, to keep everything churning, really regardless of the diplomatic consequences of saying that out loud.
And this logic, this idea of constant movement, it extends to how he talks about himself, doesn't it? He has to be the only one who can make things happen.
Precisely.
Yeah.
If everyone else is just talking, he has to be the one pushing. So he offers these definitive, unambiguous diagnoses of every problem. Their immigration policy is a disaster.
No nuance, just it's a disaster.
Zero nuance. And he'll sweep an entire continent into it. Europe, they're not handling it well. They talk, but they don't produce.
And that gives him the perfect launch pad to list his own so-called accomplishments, the proof of his action.
Presented with that same absolute certainty. I solved 8 wars. I returned $3 trillion from the Middle East. I sold 300 Boeing planes.
It's all part of the same framing.
It is. It neatly frames the world into 2 camps. The talkers, the people who deliberate and get nothing done, and then him, the mover, the one who makes things happen immediately. And whether the claims are consistent or not, it's almost irrelevant. Their job is just to establish him as the only agent of real change.
Okay, this is where the analysis gets really interesting for me. It's how this need for speed and action simplifies, well, everything.
Yes.
We're talking about a whole rhetorical worldview that just rejects complexity from the ground up.
It has to. And there's a mechanical reason for it. Complexity itself creates the suspicion that things might be, more complicated.
Which would require explanation.
And that takes time. If the goal is rapid movement, any time you spend explaining nuance is time you've wasted. And you see this in the structure of the language itself, the almost total rejection of complex sentences.
Okay, help me understand that a bit. What do you mean complex sentence structures?
Avoiding things like subordinate clauses or causal clauses, the words that introduce nuance. If this happens, then that follows. Or, because of X, we have to consider Y. When you strip all that away, you're left with just a string of simple main clauses. He often just stitches one to the next, sometimes repeating the same words like he's rewinding a tape.
So the language is just, it's direct, it's blunt, it's linear. There's no need for any, delicate wordplay or decoration.
None at all. And that structure feeds directly into a binary way of thinking. Because if there's no room for nuance in the sentence, there's no room for it in the world.
So everything has to be an extreme.
It'd have to be. No middle ground. Politicians are either good or bad, smart or stupid. Countries are either totally crime-free or they're, quote, drowning in crime, and he'll name places like Sweden or Germany.
The source material calls this a storybook understanding of the world.
Which is a perfect diagnosis. Good guys and bad guys. That's it. It allows people to assign blame and identify the solution, him very, very quickly.
And this extends even into geopolitics, shifting the whole framework from realism to something darker, more fatalistic.
It does. Let's talk about that. The difference between realpolitik and what the sources are calling fatalpolitik.
Right.
So realpolitik is still complex. It's about calculating national interests, alliances, consequences. It could be cynical, but it's strategic. Fatalpolitik is way simpler.
How so?
It runs on a single fatalistic principle.
Yes.
Size will win, generally.
Like when he talks about Russia and Ukraine, it's just, look at the number.
Exactly. It's acknowledging this, unpleasant reality that sheer physical scale might just dictate the outcome no matter what international principles say.
Which is a very reductive way to look at it.
It's incredibly reductive. While he might say he respects the bravery of one side, the operating logic is that some outcomes are just inevitable because of size. And that view is only really acceptable if your entire focus is on the deal.
The deal and the goal.
Right. If you're only thinking about the next transaction, then core principles like, territorial integrity or democracy, they can be set aside. They just become obstacles to getting the next move done.
That is such a critical point. It changes the entire definition of success. Success isn't about upholding a principle. It's just about forcing an outcome.
Precisely. And this leads us to what is maybe the biggest break from traditional discourse, the rejection of coherence itself.
Okay, so traditional rhetoric, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks, it demands internal coherence, right?
Yeah.
Your argument has to hang together.
It has to. It requires consistency, and it requires something called the hermeneutical reflex.
The what now?
The hermeneutical reflex. It's just a fancy way of saying you have to recognize and acknowledge the other side's position.
You have to show you understand why they might disagree.
Yes, so that the audience gets the full picture. The speaker we're analyzing, he has none of that. Opposing views aren't engaged with. They're just dismissed or attacked.
But I have to push back a little here. If he's not coherent, if he makes contradictory statements, isn't that just standard politics? Isn't that just spin or even lying? What's actually different?
The difference is structural. This is the most critical finding in the analysis. The rhetorical mechanism he uses, it functions regardless of the content. It's not just that he might lie, it's that the system itself doesn't care about truth.
That's the real disruption.
I want you to think of the rhetoric as like a sturdy, high-speed vehicle. It has room inside for everything, fact and lie, logic and nonsense, respectful and disgraceful comments.
They all just sit side by side.
Undistinguished. They're all just cargo. And the rhetorical function of that vehicle, to create movement, to pressure people, to simplify the world, is not disturbed by the fact that the cargo is contradictory. The mechanism works anyway.
Wow. So in traditional rhetoric, if your facts are wrong, the whole argument should collapse.
It should.
But here, the structure is so focused on that next move that the fact checkers just become irrelevant to how the rhetoric actually functions.
They do. The insults, the exaggerations, the simple sentences, those are just tactics.
Right.
The real break, the real rupture, is this functional indifference to things like consistency or facts. The machine doesn't need them to run.
So if this mechanism is so resistant to the usual critiques, what does this all mean for the listener, for the voter? Why is a style that gets so much criticism so incredibly effective?
Well, it taps into this deep, pervasive feeling of frustration and urgency. He plays the role of someone who doesn't just discuss what to do. He's the one who causes something to happen.
Here and now.
Here and now. Not next quarter, not next year. Now.
And we see that timeline plastered on everything. You look at his inaugural address and everything starts right now or today or this week. Actions will happen immediately and quickly.
The golden age, he says, has just begun. It's a rhetoric of radical speed. It totally rejects deliberation. Ending illegal immigration right now. Ending inflation rapidly. Declaring only 2 genders as of today. The sheer volume of it all is overwhelming.
And it communicates one simple thing. Inertia ends with me.
Yes. And that message speaks directly to voters who have lost faith in the ability of standard politics to get anything done. They feel like every traditional project just gets bogged down in endless debate and bureaucracy.
The message is powerful. With me, the frustration ends. I act, and I act right now. I don't discuss.
And it really appeals to people who saw, for instance, during the corona crisis, that suddenly everything was possible. Governments could move incredibly fast.
Right. They can make huge radical changes overnight.
Which proved to a lot of people that the capacity for political speed is there. You just need a leader who's willing to bypass all the complexity and use it.
The sources label this reductive rhetoric, and they argue that just calling him a populist or narcissist kind of misses the point of why it works.
It does, because as the analysis says, rhetorical mechanisms are cold. They either work because they're meeting an existing political need or they don't.
Oh.
And this one works.
Yeah.
It works because it responds to that deep existing hunger among voters for action, for simplicity, and for leadership that feels decisive.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into the engineering of a political language. We've gone from a physical cue, that posture of constant readiness, all the way to transactional, chess-like language, the simplicity of a storybook world, and then this stunning idea of a functional indifference to coherence.
The whole structure is built for one thing: immediate movement. And when that becomes the only goal, the need for consistency or patience or careful explanation, it just vanishes from the equation.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener. If exposing the mechanics of this style, the contradictions, the simplicity doesn't stop it from working, what does that say about our established tradition of political discourse, the one that's built on coherence and reason and discussion? Are voters now demanding a new kind of communication, one that values urgency over explanation? And if they are, what happens next?